Opening statement,
Yes, Your Honor.
please.
Help! 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 Those are the words that Amanda Morris and Sarah Bucksbaum heard as they were walking up the Pali Puka Trail on March 24th, 2025. Amanda and Sarah heard those words, help, 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 and they rushed up the trail thinking that somebody had fallen off of the cliff on top. They get to the section with the cliff, and they see, and Amanda sees, a man on top of a woman. A man holding a rock. The man swings the rock, hits the woman in the head. Sarah sees that same man standing over that same woman, holding that same rock. Both of them see the woman, Arielle Konig, with a face covered in blood. In this trial, you will learn about Arielle Konig, who she is, what happened that day. But you'll also learn about the man holding the rock, the man who hit her with that rock, Dr. Gerhardt Konig, anesthesiologist, Arielle's husband, and the defendant in this case. Now, Arielle and Dr. Konig, the defendant, normally don't live on Oahu. They're from Maui, where Arielle works remotely and Dr. Konig practices anesthesia. But that weekend, March 24th, 2025, just under a year ago, they came to Oahu for Arielle's birthday. Arielle's birthday, March 24th, the day this happened. It was actually Arielle's very first trip to Oahu. Her first time coming to this island. The defendant planned the trip. The defendant booked the tickets. The defendant booked the hotel room. The defendant planned the couple's activities. The defendant researched and planned the hike that he took Arielle on that morning. That morning, March 24th, 2025, around 10 o'clock in the morning, the defendant drives Arielle up to the Pali Lookout. They get to the Pali Lookout, the big tourist area overlooking the whole bunch of the windward side, and they get ready to go on the hike. The trailhead for the Pali Puka Trail is in the bus parking lot of the Pali Lookout, so not where rental cars or other people park. It's on the other side, next to a set of bathrooms over a wall. So the defendant takes Arielle there, but when they get to the trailhead, they see other potential hikers. They see other people looking for how to start the trail. And Arielle wants to help them. She wants to help them find where the trail starts so that those people can hike up the trail. And she suggests that to the defendant. She says, why don't we show them where the trail is? And he tells her, no. He wants to hike with her alone. He doesn't want to help those people. He wants to hike with her alone. So, they don't go up the trail at that point. They go to the Pali Lookout. They go to the tourist area with the plaques. They go to the lookout looking all over the windward side and stay there for a few minutes, take photos, then go back to the trail. Now when they go back, there's nobody else. They're alone, and they start the hike together. They start the hike. It starts in a heavily forested area. You climb over a wall, you go past a sign, you start going up a hill. It's a steep hill, a lot of tree roots, but not a lot of brush cover on the very start. So they go up this hill, and they get to the top of the ridge. Once they get to the top of the ridge, the trail goes left. The trail follows the top of the ridge. On one side, the town side, there's a steep hill covered in forest, heavy brush on the ground. But on the other side, the windward side of the trail, sheer cliff, a several 100-foot drop all the way to the bottom of the Pali. They start to hike up the trail. They start to hike up the ridge. And they go for a few minutes. Everything's normal. But they get to a point where you need to climb with your hands and your feet, a scramble area. Once they get to that point, Arielle gets freaked out by the exposure. She doesn't like that there's a big cliff to the right. She doesn't like there's a steep hill down the left. Doesn't like that she has to climb on her hands and feet. So she wants to turn around. And the whole reason of going to the Pali Puka hike is because there's a puka. Up the trail, there is a puka, a hole in the side of the mountain where you can look through the hole, take photos, where you can look out through the puka down at the windward side. But they never got there because Arielle wanted to turn around. So Arielle stops hiking. She says she's not comfortable with this. She wants to turn around. The defendant goes on. He hikes another couple minutes up the trail. He hikes another couple minutes, then he comes back and he tells Arielle. Tries to convince her to keep going. He tries to say, oh, this is the hardest part. Everything beyond this little bit, easy. But Arielle's still not feeling it. Arielle doesn't want to go on. So they start to descend. And as they start to descend the trail, as they start to walk down that ridge, now, at this point, the steep hill with the forest is on the right, the town side, and the cliff side, the windward side, is on the left. They walk down the trail. They're taking photos. They're sending photos to their family. Defendant ends up taking Arielle's phone to take photos of her, to take a selfie. And Arielle actually takes a photo of the defendant with her phone as well, right by the cliff. Arielle takes a photo and she sends it to her family on an application called Snapchat with the tagline on there, "Don't look down." The defendant then wants to take a photo with Arielle right by the edge of the cliff. And she says she's uncomfortable with it. She's uncomfortable with the cliff. She's uncomfortable with the fall, with the danger. So she goes, she holds onto a tree, and she tries to take the photo. The defendant goes back up, away from the cliff, back towards the trail. Arielle follows. And then as Arielle's moving down the trail to safely get by the defendant at this narrow spot with the cliff behind her, the defendant ends up grabbing her by her shoulders. He pushes her backwards towards that cliff. Arielle goes to the ground. She goes to the ground. They start wrestling. They start struggling. They start fighting. And in that fight, the defendant gains the advantage. The defendant gets on top of Arielle. The defendant is straddling Arielle over her waist, pinning her onto the ground. And Arielle's trying to fight back. She's trying to struggle. But she sees in the defendant's hand a syringe. She sees in the defendant's hand a syringe, and she tries to hit it away. She hits it. The syringe falls out the defendant's hand. And then she sees a vial in the same hand. As the defendant reaches into the backpack he had, reaching in there, trying to grab something, Arielle still struggles. She still tries to take that vial out of his hand. And they keep fighting. And at this time, the defendant has Arielle's phone. The defendant is holding on to Arielle's purse. The defendant is holding on to Arielle's wallet. Arielle pleads with the defendant. She talks about their children. She asks the defendant not to do this. She begs him not to do this. And the defendant says, "I'm sick of this shit." He's sick of this shit. Arielle calms the defendant down. She thinks she calms the defendant down until the defendant picks up that rock. Until the defendant picks up that rock that Amanda Morris saw. Until the defendant picks up that rock that Sarah Buxbaum saw. And just when she thought the defendant had calmed down, he starts to take that rock and bash her in the head multiple times. "Help! Help! Help!" is what Arielle says while the defendant is hitting her. And those cries were answered. Those cries were answered when Amanda Morris and Sarah Buxbaum arrived on the scene. The defendant stood up. Amanda again saw him hit Arielle. The defendant stands up. Arielle is able to scoot away. Arielle is able to get to Amanda and Sarah, and they're able to get Arielle safely down the rest of the trail. Once Arielle got to that safety of Amanda and Sarah, the defendant was left alone at the scene. Alone with Arielle's phone. Alone with Arielle's wallet. Alone with Arielle's purse. Alone with the syringe. And alone with the vial. All those items, Arielle's phone, purse, wallet, the syringe, the vial, those were never recovered. The story doesn't end quite there once Arielle gets to safety. A few minutes later, at 10:36 a.m., the defendant takes his phone out. He dials his son, his 19-year-old son, named Emil. He calls him on the FaceTime application on his phone. He does a video call so Emil can see his dad. And Emil sees his dad with blood all over him. And what does the defendant say to Emil? He says, "I'm not going to make it back. I tried to kill Ari, but she got away." That's what the defendant tells Emil. He doesn't just tell Emil that he tried to kill Arielle, though. He tells her why. The defendant tells Emil, "She's been cheating on me for the last 3 months, or the last several months." He gives his motive to Emil, and he explains his reasoning. He even tells Emil, "I'm at the end of my rope. An hour later, the defendant calls Emil back. The first question the defendant asks him, Emil, did you tell anybody? And Emil says yes. Emil says, I told Judy and Peter Mast, Arielle's mom and stepdad. Now, how does the defendant respond? He says he's going to jump. Emil tells him not to, tries to convince him not to, and the defendant ends the phone call by saying, I got to hang up so the police don't find me. That phone call was at around 11:40 a.m. That's the last anyone heard of the defendant for the next 6 to 7 hours. The defendant told Emil that he was turning his phone off so the police couldn't find him. And for a long time, they couldn't. Despite a manhunt that lasted for almost 8 hours that day, multiple different agencies, Honolulu Police Department, Honolulu Fire Department, the Department of Land and Natural Resources, multiple agencies all trying to find the defendant, all searching for him in that forest up there at the Pali Puka area. None of them could find him. But later on, as the sun was getting ready to set, a few minutes after 6 p.m., March 24, 2025, 3 HPD officers are headed back to the station. They've been called off the search. They're done. They couldn't find him. But as they're driving on that road that goes from the Pali Lookout back to the Pali Highway, back to town, they're driving out and they see a man. They see a man exit the forest. A man matching the description of the defendant. They identify themselves. They say, police, police. The man runs. He tries to get to the forest. He tries to escape them. The officers catch up. They apprehend him. They do use force to do so. And the man is identified as Dr. Gerhardt Konig. Now, you'll hear about this case. You've all been informed about how long this trial is going to be. So you'll hear about this case in a couple different phases. First, you'll hear from witnesses, Amanda Morris, Sarah Bucksbaum. You'll hear what happened up at the Pali Lookout on March 24, 2025. You'll hear how the investigation proceeded. You'll hear from the HPD officers who responded. You'll hear from the DLNR officer who responded. You'll hear from the evidence specialists who went to the scene, who took photographs of the bloody patch on the ground, of the crushed plants, of the trail of blood. You'll see those photos. You'll see the photos of Arielle at the scene and how she looked like immediately after this happened. You'll hear from Arielle herself. She'll testify as to what happened on March 24th, her birthday. And she'll testify on March 24th of this year. 1 year later. She'll describe what happened that day. She'll describe the 3 months, almost 4 months, leading up to that day. She'll describe this cheating that the defendant was upset about. Because back in December 2024, the defendant found WhatsApp messages between Arielle and a coworker. Arielle describes them as flirty. You will see the messages. You will see the messages and you will get to see what they say. There's nothing lewd. There's nothing sexual. There's nothing romantic. They're flirty. But this was an issue in their relationship. The defendant was upset. Arielle wanted to stay in the relationship. They take the steps. They go to couples counseling. Things are getting better. Things are getting better. And Arielle keeps thinking, okay, now it's time. A romantic trip, birthday weekend, we're back on track. Lastly, Arielle will explain what happened after this incident. So after March 24th, what kind of injuries she had, what kind of effects they had on her. She'll explain, and you will hear testimony, that Arielle, after this happened, by several days, removed the money from a joint bank account that she shared with the defendant. You'll hear that Arielle removed that money, that she used it to pay the mortgage, that she used it to pay for the tuition for the children she shared with the defendant, that she used it to pay marital debt that they'd incurred, that she used it to pay the defendant's own credit card bills. So you'll see what Arielle did with that money. Okay. Beyond that, you'll hear scientific evidence in this case. There will be DNA testimony. All of the blood that was found on the trail was swabbed. All that blood was subjected to DNA testing. And all of that blood, through the DNA testing, shows an incredibly high likelihood ratio that supports it is Arielle's blood and only her blood. But not only the blood from the trail. Several different swabs from the defendant's clothes recovered from his person all will show Arielle's blood, and none will show his. You'll see the evidence that was collected. You'll see the rock. You'll see the rock that was recovered from the trail. The bottom half, jagged, covered in Arielle's blood. You'll also hear in this case what's called digital forensics. The police recovered a laptop, the defendant's laptop. And they looked through that laptop for certain terms, and they found from December 2024 through March 2025 several relevant things that you'll hear. You'll hear the defendant on Christmas Eve 2024, 3 in the morning, was on the internet looking up internet forum posts about infidelity. You'll hear the defendant on Christmas Day at 4 in the morning was doing the same thing. You'll hear that on New Year's Eve, 8:30 p.m., the defendant was looking up Arielle's financial information. You'll see from the forensics that in those months leading up to March 24th, you will see what was on the defendant's mind by looking at the digital forensics. You'll see that he was looking up divorce. He was looking up how much his prior divorce had cost him. He was looking up notes on Arielle's computer about divorce. He was looking up Arielle's financials. And lastly, from the digital forensics, you will see these messages that the defendant was so upset about. Okay, almost there. Okay. near the end, the last couple phases of this trial, you'll hear from Emil Konig. He'll testify what happened on March 24th. He'll testify about that first phone call, about what his dad told him, about why his dad did it. He'll testify about that second phone call, about what his dad told him he was going to do. We hear that the defendant confessed and that he planned to hide from the police. And lastly, at the end, you'll hear from the officers who successfully apprehended the defendant. On their way back to the station, just ran into him. So you hear from them what they saw, what the defendant did, and how they managed to catch him. And at the end of this case, at the end of all this evidence, the state will come back, the evidence will show, and the state will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Dr. Gerhardt Konig consciously, intentionally made a choice on March 24th, 2025 to try to take a life. And when the state does that, we will ask you to find the defendant guilty as charged. Thank you.